Somewhere in your kitchen tonight, there's a food doing quiet damage to the bacteria your body depends on. Not takeout, not candy, 9 everyday foods, several of them wearing a health halo they haven't earned. Light, sugar-free, gut-friendly. Right there on the label. Number 3 is a food most doctors still recommend for a healthy heart, and researchers have traced how your own gut bacteria can turn part of it into a compound tied to narrowed blood vessels. Number 5 is sitting in half the yogurt cups in America right now, the ones promising to help your gut. I spent 20 years as a registered nurse. Gut bacteria never once showed up on a single chart I filled out. What's making a lot of folks feel puffy, tired, and foggy isn't hiding in a takeout bag. It's labeled to look like the good guy. Nothing here replaces your doctor. I'll say that once and mean it. Real journals, real studies. The strange part, it's often the products marketed loudest as gut healthy that carry the ingredients this research keeps flagging. A few of these 9 I ate for years without a second thought. By the time we're through, you'll read a label the way I used to read a lab report. Let's start with the one that's probably in your freezer right this minute. Number 1 is sitting in your freezer right now, and it's got a list of ingredients most of us skip straight past. Ice cream. Not the 2-ingredient kind your grandmother might have churned by hand. I mean the tub kind. Smooth, never icy. Scoops like butter straight out of a deep freeze. That smoothness doesn't happen by accident. Food companies add emulsifiers, things like carboxymethylcellulose and polysorbate 80, to keep the fat and water from separating. Well, think about salad dressing. Oil and vinegar want to split apart the second you stop shaking the jar. An emulsifier is what stops that, a molecular peacekeeper, holding 2 things together that don't naturally want to mix. And it's not confined to the ice cream aisle either. The same class of ingredients shows up in bottled salad dressings, coffee creamers, some packaged baked goods, and processed sauces, anywhere a factory needs a texture to hold steady on a shelf for weeks. There's a difference, by the way, between the emulsifiers a home cook uses, an egg yolk in a mayonnaise, say, and the synthetic ones built for shelf life. Your gut bacteria seem to handle the first kind just fine. It's the manufactured, long-lasting versions the research keeps circling back to. Handy trick in a factory. Inside your gut, it's a different story. In 2015, researchers publishing in the journal Nature fed mice a diet with common emulsifiers and found something that stopped me in my tracks. The mucus layer, that thin protective coating keeping your gut bacteria a respectful distance from the wall of your intestine, got thinner. Bacteria moved in closer than they're meant to. The mice developed low-grade inflammation and signs resembling metabolic syndrome. Mice aren't people, though, so a follow-up study put real volunteers in a hospital research unit and fed some of them a controlled diet with added carboxymethylcellulose. The bacteria known for producing calming, protective compounds dropped off. Some folks reported more gas, more bloating. I think of that mucus layer like the fence around my garden beds. Not there to keep everything out. Plenty needs to pass through both ways. It's there to keep a respectful distance between the soil community and the house. Thin that fence out, and you get uninvited guests wandering closer to the porch than anyone's comfortable with. Sneaky. I think about the patients I saw over the years with unexplained gut trouble. No clear diagnosis, just persistent discomfort. I can't tell you emulsifiers caused any one case. Nobody can, not from a single study. But I do wonder now what I'd have asked them differently back then. What gets me is the frequency. A tub of ice cream isn't eaten once a year at a birthday party anymore. It's in the freezer every week for a lot of families. Combine that with the coffee creamer every morning and the processed sauce every dinner, and you've got the same class of emulsifier arriving multiple times a day, most days of the week, without a second thought. That cumulative load is what the research keeps flagging. The Creator gave us a gut that's remarkably good at tolerating imperfection. It's been doing so for a very long time. What it may not have been designed for is the same synthetic compound arriving at every single meal, year after year. That's a relatively new experiment, and the results are still coming in. Number 2 is the can a lot of folks reach for because they think they're doing something good. Diet soda, zero sugar energy drinks, that little pink or yellow packet at the coffee shop. In 2014, a team published in Nature showing that non-caloric sweeteners, saccharin, in their main experiments, changed the makeup of gut bacteria in mice enough to bring on blood sugar intolerance, not despite the missing calories, because of what the sweetener itself did to the microbial community. Let me put that plain. Your gut bacteria don't just sit there. They're chemists, in a sense, sampling whatever comes down the pipe and responding to it. An artificial sweetener rings the sweet bell without delivering the sugar. Some researchers think that mismatch tips the balance toward bacterial strains linked with poorer blood sugar control. The study's strongest findings were with saccharin. That was their primary test compound. But the researchers also observed microbiota shifts with sucralose in some experiments, and they noted the human data showed individual variation. Some people responded strongly, others barely at all. That variability is part of what makes this science hard to reduce to a single headline. A separate 2018 study, published in Inflammatory Bowel Diseases, looked at sucralose specifically in a mouse model designed to resemble Crohn's disease, and found it encouraged the kind of bacterial imbalance associated with gut inflammation. It's not only soda either. Sugar-free gum, flavored waters, some children's vitamins. Dearie, sweeteners have gotten into more corners of the pantry than most of us realize. I'll say the same thing to you. I'd say to any patient asking about a supplement, talk to your doctor before swapping anything major in your diet, especially if you're managing diabetes. This isn't a reason to panic. It's a reason to read a label a little slower. None of this means every diet soda is doing active harm to every person who drinks one. Bodies vary, gut bacteria vary person to person, almost like a fingerprint. What the research gives us is a pattern worth knowing, not a verdict for every single can. Stevia and monk fruit, the plant-derived sweeteners, haven't shown the same clear pattern in the research so far, though the studies there are fewer, and I'd rather tell you honestly what's thin evidence than dress it up as settled. My grandmother, or maybe it was her sister, my memory gets those two mixed up some days, always said if you can't pronounce it, your body's probably guessing too. I didn't understand what she meant until I was 30 years into nursing. Read slow. That's really the whole lesson. Quietly. What I notice most now, walking the grocery aisle, is how many diet products lead with the word healthy on the front and then bury the sweetener list on the back. Aspartame, acesulfame, K, sucralose, sometimes all three in one bottle. The front of a package is marketing. The back is the truth. Get in the habit of flipping it over before it goes in the cart. Number 3 is one that gets recommended, believe it or not, right alongside the vegetables. Lean beef, bacon at Sunday breakfast, the deli meat tucked into a sandwich. Red meat. In 2013, a team publishing in Nature Medicine traced something I hadn't learned in nursing school. Red meat is rich in a compound called L-carnitine. Certain gut bacteria, the ones that thrive on a meat-heavy diet, convert that L-carnitine into a substance the liver then turns into TMAO. In that study, TMAO was tied to faster buildup of arterial plaque in mice, and in a group of nearly 2,600 people already being evaluated for heart trouble, higher blood levels of TMAO tracked with a greater risk of heart attack, stroke, or death over the following 3 years. The researchers were careful about this, and so am I. TMAO was tied to risk in that specific study population, people already being evaluated for heart concerns. It wasn't tested as a standalone verdict on every steak dinner in America. Fish, oddly enough, is also rich in a related compound, and some researchers point out we don't see the same alarm bells around fish consumption. A puzzle the field is still working through. I've got a rooster out back who'd argue with me about which meat's healthiest. Noisy old thing. More opinion than sense some mornings. But he's not wrong that variety matters more than any one rule. Here's the part that stuck with me most. Vegetarians and vegans in that same research produced far less TMAO after eating the identical amount of L-carnitine, simply because their gut bacteria weren't built for that job. Same nutrient, different community of workers processing it, completely different outcome. I think of certain gut bacteria like little haulers. Feed them steady red meat and their numbers grow, more trucks on the road, so to speak. And what they're hauling, according to this research, tends to end up along the walls of your blood vessels, not unlike litter piling up along a well-used highway. I'm not telling anyone to swear off meat forever. I still keep a roast in the oven most Sundays. But if you've got a family history of heart disease, or your doctor's already mentioned your cholesterol numbers, this is worth raising at your next visit. Ask about TMAO specifically, and let a professional look at your whole picture, not just one study. I keep coming back to portion size when patients used to ask me about meat and their hearts. Doesn't seem the research has changed my answer much. It's just given me a completely different reason for saying it. Poultry, interestingly, carries far less L-carnitine than beef or lamb. One more reason the science tends to point toward what kind of meat and how often, rather than meat itself as some singular villain. Potent. It's also worth knowing that the gut bacteria capable of generating TMAO aren't fixed. They respond to diet. Researchers found that vegetarians who had spent years not eating much red meat produced almost none of the compound after a carnitine challenge. Their microbial community simply hadn't been shaped for that conversion. That's not a reason to become a vegetarian overnight. It is a reason to think about what you're feeding that community day in and day out over the long run. Number 4 might ruffle a few feathers. And that's all right. Alcohol. Beer with dinner, a glass of wine most evenings. I'm not here to preach. I've had my share of both. A 2017 review in the journal Alcohol Research laid out what chronic drinking does to the gut in plain terms. It shifts the balance of gut bacteria. It roughens the intestinal lining, making it easier for bacterial fragments to slip from the gut into the bloodstream. Researchers call that increased permeability, though most folks know it by a plainer nickname, leaky gut. Once those fragments get into circulation, the whole body can end up in a low simmer of inflammation. Once those bacterial fragments cross into the bloodstream, the liver, which filters blood straight from the gut, often takes the first hit. That's part of why heavy, long-term drinking and liver trouble travel together so often. The gut and the liver are more connected than most people realize. The encouraging part of that same body of research, the gut lining, does seem capable of some repair once drinking eases up. Not instant, not guaranteed. But the door isn't permanently shut either. Well, I picture the gut lining like the screen door on my back porch. Fine mesh, keeps the flies out, lets the breeze through. Alcohol, used heavily and often, is like taking a stiff brush to that screen, coarsens the weave, and before long, things get through that shouldn't. This one's dose-dependent, and the research is honest about that. A glass of wine on a Friday is a different picture than a bottle most nights. If drinking has become more than an occasional thing in your house, that's a conversation for your doctor, not a YouTube video. And there's no shame in having it. I've sat with more than one patient over the years who didn't want to talk about their drinking, and I learned a long time ago that shame never once got anybody to cut back. Honesty did, sometimes. Shame, never. Out here, a small glass of something on the porch after a long day in the beds still feels like a blessing from the soil. Grapes turned into something worth savoring. Moderation, though. Real moderation. Not the kind we tell ourselves we're practicing. A porch, a good book, the fog rolling over the backfield. Turns out plenty of what I loved about that glass was never really about the wine at all. Honest. What the research also notes is that the gut-brain connection runs in both directions. Disrupted gut bacteria send signals upward through nerve pathways and chemical messengers, and some researchers have begun linking alcohol-related dysbiosis with the anxiety and mood changes that often accompany heavy drinking. It's still an emerging area, and I won't overstate it, but it's not nothing either. Number 5 might sting a little because it's usually sitting right next to the foods we think are helping our gut. Flavored yogurt, almond milk and other plant milks, some infant formulas, and processed soups. The common thread is carrageenan, a thickener pulled from red seaweed, used to keep these products smooth and stop them from separating on the shelf. A 2017 review in Trends in Food Science and Technology pulled together years of laboratory and animal research showing carrageenan can trigger an inflammatory response in the cells lining the gut. Now, I'll be fair here. There is real scientific debate about carrageenan. Some researchers argue the degraded form used in older lab studies isn't quite the same as the food-grade version on your yogurt shelf, and that the human evidence, while real, is still thinner than researchers would like. I'm giving you the fullest picture I've got, not a settled verdict. In 2022, a randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of Functional Foods tested carrageenan directly in healthy human volunteers and found it disrupted the function of the intestinal barrier, even in people with no digestive disease at all. The amounts used were close to what a person eats in an ordinary week of processed dairy, not some extreme laboratory dose, part of why it caught researchers' attention. Here's the kitchen table version. Your immune system has cells stationed along the gut wall, watching for the shape of invading germs. Carrageenan has a shape close enough to some of those germs that the immune system can mistake it for trouble. A false alarm. Again and again, meal after meal. And it's not confined to one item on the shelf. It shows up in the yogurt aisle, the plant milk aisle, and the deli case, all in the same afternoon of shopping. Rare is the label that spells it out plainly. Most just call it carrageenan in 6-point type. Cottage cheese, ironically, is one of the few dairy products I've found that's usually carrageenan-free. Worth checking if that's a staple in your house. I used to think natural on a label meant something. Seaweed is about as natural as it gets, and here we are, still needing to read the fine print. Careful. Pet food carries it too, oddly enough. I noticed that on my dog's food can one evening and went down a rabbit hole I wasn't expecting. Turns out the same shelf life logic applies whether it's your dinner or the dog's. Here's the part I find most frustrating about carrageenan specifically. It hides inside the foods people buy precisely because they're trying to do right by their gut. The almond milk instead of whole milk. The flavored yogurt instead of ice cream. If you're making a genuine effort and the effort is being undermined by an ingredient on the back of the same package, that matters. You deserve to know it's there. Number 6 is the most ordinary thing on this whole list. White bread, refined pastries, anything made from flour stripped of its bran and germ before it ever reaches your kitchen. In 2016, a team out of Stanford published a study in Nature I still think about. They transplanted a human gut microbiota into germ-free mice, then fed some of those mice a low-fiber diet across multiple generations. Each generation lost a little more microbial diversity than the last. After 4 generations on that low-fiber diet, even switching back to high fiber couldn't fully restore what had been lost. Some bacterial strains had simply dropped below detectable levels, gone from the community entirely, no longer there to replenish, like a garden that loses a variety of seed each year until half the old strains simply aren't there to plant anymore. The Stanford team's finding about diversity not fully bouncing back, that's the part that changed how I think about cheat days. A skipped salad here and there isn't the concern. It's the pattern, stretched out over years, that the research says matters most. A separate study out of the University of Michigan published in the journal Cell dug into the mechanism. Dietary fiber is food for your gut bacteria, what they ferment for fuel. Take the fiber away, and some of those bacteria don't just go hungry and quiet. They start feeding on the mucus lining of your gut itself, the same protective layer we talked about with the emulsifiers. Well, I think about that like the hay in my chicken coop. Feed the flock well, and they leave the roost alone. Stop bringing the hay, and eventually they start pecking at the wood. White bread isn't the villain wearing a poison label. The trouble is what's missing, same as an empty pantry. Not what's there causing harm, but what never got brought home. Most Americans, by the way, eat somewhere around half the daily fiber that's generally recommended. It's not only bread, either. White rice, most crackers, a good deal of what passes for a quick breakfast. Anywhere the whole grain got polished away somewhere on its trip to the box. I didn't grow up eating much whole grain either, if I'm honest. Changed that late in life, same as a lot of things. Simple. Barley, farro, steel-cut oats, even a good brown rice. None of it complicated, none of it expensive. The bacteria don't care how fancy the grain is. They just care that something with a little roughage shows up on the plate now and again. The short-chain fatty acids those bacteria produce when they ferment fiber, butyrate is the one researchers mention most often, do something I find quietly remarkable. They feed the cells lining the colon directly. So fiber isn't just feeding bacteria. The bacteria turn around and feed the gut wall itself. It took scientists decades to trace that loop, and we keep interrupting it 3 times a day by handing the system white flour instead. Number 7 hides inside things marketed as the healthy choice. Protein bars, flavored oatmeal packets, sports drinks, Some of those meal replacement shakes lined up at the pharmacy counter. The ingredient doing the quiet damage here is maltodextrin, a starch-derived filler used to add bulk and texture without adding much flavor of its own. A study out of the Cleveland Clinic, published in PLOS One back in 2012, tested maltodextrin against a strain of E. coli associated with Crohn's disease. The bacteria exposed to maltodextrin built thick, sticky biofilms, colonies that cling stubbornly to the gut wall, at levels far beyond what the same bacteria built when exposed to plain table sugar. To be fair, maltodextrin itself isn't classified as dangerous by food safety regulators, and most people eating it occasionally likely have nothing to worry about. What the research raises is a question about frequency, how often, and alongside what else it's showing up on a plate. It's derived from corn, rice, or potato starch, broken down in a factory process, which is part of why it slides onto so many labels without raising an eyebrow. It sounds almost like a vegetable. Think of it like this. Some bacteria build little forts to hide from your immune system and hold their ground. Maltodextrin, according to this research, acts almost like fresh mortar for those forts, helping the wrong residents build sturdier, harder-to-evict homes right on your gut wall. Was it 3 follow-up studies or 4? Honestly, I lose track. There's been more than one, and they keep pointing the same direction. What I remember clearly is this. Maltodextrin shows up on labels as innocent as rice, and it's in more healthy snack packaging than almost anything else on this list. Rice cakes, some gluten-free breads, a good number of powdered drink mixes. Maltodextrin turns up as a bulking agent almost anywhere a company needs cheap volume without much flavor of its own. I'll admit, I used to keep a sports drink in my nursing bag for the long shifts. Never once looked at the ingredients. Different job now. Different bag. Common. I keep noticing how many of these 9 show up first in the foods marketed to people trying hardest to eat well. The dieters, the athletes, the folks reading labels closest. There's an irony in that worth sitting with. A follow-up study, also out of the Cleveland Clinic group, found maltodextrin suppressed some of the gut's natural defenses against salmonella specifically. The bacteria were better able to colonize the gut of mice that had been fed it. That's a separate mechanism from the biofilm finding, which is part of why this ingredient keeps drawing attention. 2 different ways it may be shifting the odds in the wrong direction, not just one. Number 8 is really a whole category wearing 100 different labels. Fast food, frozen dinners, box meals you just add water to. A 2018 review in the journal Nutrients from researchers Zunacher and Linseth made a case that stuck with me. They argued that ultra-processed foods harm the body largely through their effect on the gut community, not through what's added alone, but through what's missing. Fiber, whole plant compounds, the complexity a body expects from real food. Their review tied heavy consumption of these products to reduce microbial diversity and a greater risk of the inflammatory conditions tied to modern life. The researchers were careful to note this is an association, not a courtroom verdict. Correlation, not proof that any single frozen dinner causes any single illness, but the pattern held up across a wide body of research they reviewed, which is why it earned a spot on this list. The NOVA classification system, the one researchers often use to sort foods by how processed they are, puts fast food, packaged snacks, and most frozen meals in the same top category. Worth knowing the term if you ever want to read further yourself. Well, I think of my gut community like a small town. A healthy one's got a butcher, a baker, a produce stand, a dozen little specialty shops, each doing their own particular job well. Flood that town with one giant, all-in-one store, and the little shops close up, one by one. You still technically have a town. It's just a lot less capable of handling anything unexpected. There's a simple rule of thumb I use at the store now, though it's mine, not a researcher's. If the ingredient list reads longer than the cooking instructions, I look a little closer. I fed my own kids more boxed dinners than I'd like to admit, raising them while working night shifts. No judgment here, dearie. Just information I wish I'd had back then. I'm not asking anyone to swear off a frozen meal on a hard week. Lord knows I've leaned on one myself after a long day out in the beds. But if it's most meals, Most days. That's worth a real conversation with your doctor or a registered dietitian about where your gut and your overall health actually stand. Not a guess. An actual conversation with real numbers. Ordinary. What strikes me most about the ultra-processed food research is the diversity piece. Not one species of bacteria being wiped out by one specific additive, but the entire breadth of the community shrinking, the way a pond shrinks in a dry summer. It's not a targeted attack on one resident. It's the whole neighborhood getting quieter. And a quiet gut, in the research, tends to mean a more vulnerable one. Number 9, and it's the one most of us grew up drinking without a second thought. Soda. Sweetened fruit drinks. The kind with more corn syrup in them than actual fruit. A 2020 study out of the University of Hohenheim in Germany, published in Nutrients, put 12 healthy women through a short-term high-fructose diet and tracked their gut bacteria the entire way. In just days, not months, the makeup of their gut community shifted. 12 women isn't a large study, and the researchers were upfront about that. But the shift happened fast enough, and consistently enough across participants, that it's been cited by other researchers since as a strong early signal worth building on. Separate animal research has tied the same sweetener to reduce levels of a bacterial group associated with a healthier metabolism, alongside signs of low-grade inflammation. High-fructose corn syrup isn't the only sweetener that can do this. Regular table sugar in large enough amounts shows some similar patterns. It's more concentrated and more common in HFCs with sweetened products, which is why it tends to top these lists. Well, here's how I picture it. Regular table sugar, sucrose, arrives as two molecules locked together. Your gut has to snip them apart before it can do anything with them. High-fructose corn syrup skips that step entirely. The fructose and glucose are already free, already separated in the factory, so they hit the small intestine ready to absorb. What doesn't get absorbed keeps moving, and it reaches your gut bacteria in an unfamiliar concentrated rush, like dumping a season's worth of fertilizer on a garden bed all at once instead of feeding it steadily. Some things grow fast, usually not the plants you wanted. Rare is the can that doesn't have it somewhere on the label. If you look, sports drinks, flavored waters, even the sauce on your ribs at a barbecue. I still remember my own mother's rule: soda was a Sunday thing, not a Tuesday thing. Wasn't science, was just common sense. And it turns out the science mostly agrees with her now. Fruit itself, whole fruit with its fiber intact, doesn't seem to carry the same concern in the research. It's the concentrated fiber-stripped syrup added to drinks and sauces that keeps showing up in these studies. Everywhere. Out in the orchard, I've got an old apple tree that drops more fruit than I know what to do with most Septembers. Never once occurred to me to worry about the sugar in that. Context, dearie. It's always about context. The fructose in that apple arrives alongside fiber, water, vitamins, and a whole host of plant compounds that slow its absorption and feed the gut on the way through. Strip all of that away, concentrate the fructose, and add it to a drink that's gone in 30 seconds. And you've got a completely different biological event, even though the chemical name on the label is the same. That difference is what the research is really about. Now that's 9. 9 ordinary foods, most of them sitting in kitchens across this whole country tonight, several of them wearing a healthy label they haven't quite earned. 9 sounds like a lot, I know. But notice, not one of them was a food you'd never heard of. Every single one is something sitting in an ordinary kitchen tonight, including mine. I want to be plain with you one more time before we close. None of this is about fear, and none of it's about perfection. I still keep ice cream in my freezer. I still pour a glass of wine some evenings. The point was never to scare you off a single food. It was to help you read a label the way I learned to read a chart, slowly, and with a little healthy suspicion. If you're managing a health condition, especially anything involving your heart, your blood sugar, or your digestion, please bring what you've learned here to your own doctor before making any big changes. I'm a retired nurse sharing what the research says, dearie, not a replacement for the person who actually knows your chart. That's not me passing the buck. It's just the honest limit of what any video, mine included, can responsibly tell you about your own particular body. Out here on the homestead this morning, the fog still hadn't burned off the backfield when I sat down to write this. There's something steadying about that. The same fog, more or less, that's been rolling through these hills longer than any of us have worried about ingredient labels. A blessing from the soil, that reminder. Slow down, read the label. Trust your gut, the actual one, and the one in your chest too. If you've made it this far, you already care more about this than most folks ever will. That matters more than any single swap on this list. What ties all 9 of these together is a simple idea. The gut community and the body it lives in are in a working relationship, and that relationship depends on certain conditions staying reasonably stable. Bacteria fed, barrier intact, immune system not constantly on edge. When that holds, you don't notice it. When it starts slipping, you feel it in ways that are genuinely hard to trace back to any specific meal. My suggestion, and it's only that, a suggestion from a retired nurse who gardens too much and reads too many studies before bed, is to pick one thing from this list this week. Just one. See how it feels to swap it, or simply to be more deliberate about it. One change, given some real time. That's always been more useful, in my experience, than 9 changes that last until Thursday. Here's my real question for you, and I'd love to read your answer down in the comments. Of these 9, which one is hardest for you to give up? And have you ever swapped it out and actually noticed a difference in how you felt? If this kind of thing is useful to you, come on back and walk the garden with me again next week. Until then, stay blessed and take good care of that gut of yours. God bless.